You might recognize Ernest Burkhart from the recent Scorsese movie, what's it called? Killers of the Flower Moon.
Yeah, Killers of the Flower Moon.
Right, Killers of the Flower Moon. But his real life story is even more chilling, I'd say. Today we're diving deep, I should say, into Burkhart's life.
Hmm.
And we're going to be using his Wikipedia entry as our guide.
Oh, cool.
So get ready for a tale of greed, betrayal, and some shocking twists as we kind of uncover his role in the Osage Indian murders back in the 1920s.
Yeah, what's really I think what makes this case so interesting is that it really kind of sits at this intersection of American history, you know,
Mm,
with the discovery of oil and Osage land and we'll see. I mean, the
right.
consequences were devastating.
Okay, so let's unpack this.
Yep.
Who is Ernest Burkhart?
Right. So Ernest Burkhart, he was born in Texas in 1892. And I think he came from pretty humble beginnings,
Mm-hmm.
as a cotton farmer's son. But in 1912, at the age of 19, news of this oil boom in Osage County, Oklahoma, reached him. And just like many other people who were seeking, fortune, opportunity, he headed there
Yeah.
and eventually ended up marrying a woman named Molly Kyle,
Okay.
who was a member of the Osage Nation
Gotcha.
in 1917.
Okay, so on the surface, it sounds like a classic tale of ambition,
Mhm.
maybe even a little bit of a love story.
Uh-huh.
But I have a feeling that there's a much darker truth lurking beneath the surface here.
Oh yeah, you're absolutely right. Burkhart, he wasn't just looking for an opportunity.
Hmm.
He became part of this conspiracy to murder Osage people for their head rights.
Oh, wow.
So these head rights, they were basically like golden tickets.
Okay.
They granted each Osage member a share of the oil profits. It was supposed to protect their wealth, but tragically it made them targets. And what's even more disturbing, I think, is that his own wife, Molly, was among those targeted.
Wait, so he wanted to kill his wife for money. That's chilling.
Yeah.
Can you tell us more about how this conspiracy unfolded?
Yeah, so the mastermind behind this horrific scheme was none other than William Hale,
Okay.
who was Burkhart's uncle.
Gotcha.
And Hale, he was a powerful rancher in Osage County. He saw the Osage wealth as his for the taking, and he basically orchestrated this campaign of terror to get his hands on it.
So we're talking about like a calculated plan to eliminate anyone standing between him and those oil witches.
Exactly. It began with the murder of Anna Brown,
Okay.
Molly's sister,
Okay.
in 1921. And Hale hired this man named Kelsey Morrison to kill her.
Mm.
And her body was found near a ravine. Just to give you an idea of kind of the staggering sums that we're talking about here, Anna's estate alone was worth $100,000 back then,
Wow.
which would be over $2 million today.
That's that's a staggering figure. It's hard to comprehend that level of greed that would drive someone to take a life for money like that.
And this was just the beginning.
Oh
A
gosh.
few weeks after Anna's murder, another one of Molly's cousins, Charles Whitehorn, was shot dead.
Oh my.
And then just 2 months after Anna's death, her mother, Lizzie Q, she died under suspicious circumstances,
Yeah.
possibly from poisoning
Gosh.
while at Burkhart's house.
Wow.
And her estate was worth even more, $250,000,
Okay.
about $6 million today.
It's a horrifying pattern.
Yeah.
It seems like Hale was systematically eliminating anyone who stood in his way. But how did Molly Burkhart's wife, how does she manage to survive this reign of terror? It feels like, I can't imagine like being married to someone who wants you dead for your money.
Yeah.
That's scary.
It's a crucial part of the story, and it eventually helped unravel this whole conspiracy.
Okay.
So Molly,
Mm.
she started to suspect something was terribly wrong, and realizing she was being slowly poisoned by her own husband.
Oh my gosh.
But fortunately, after the bombing of her sister Rita Smith's house, she was able to escape to Pawhuska,
Okay.
and she recovered.
What a terrifying ordeal.
Yeah.
So she survives this poisoning attempt, escapes the bombing, and then what?
Right.
Did she try to move on and forget about it? I can't imagine that was possible.
So Molly was a strong woman, and instead of staying silent, she took action.
Okay.
Divorced Ernest in 1926,
Wow.
and her children ended up inheriting her estate.
Okay.
And this detail is particularly interesting, I think, because it really kind of points to Hale's ultimate goal.
Okay.
It seems he wanted to inherit the entire Kill Burkhart fortune,
Gosh.
wiping out everyone in the family to get there.
This is like a chilling truth about the time.
Yeah.
that Osage wealth was so vast and greed was so potent that even family ties meant nothing in the face of potential riches. It makes you wonder how many other families suffered similar fates during this era.
Yeah, that's a question that haunts this entire story.
Yeah.
So we have these horrific murders, this elaborate scheme for wealth, but did justice prevail? Were Hale and Burkhart held accountable for their crimes?
That's what I'm wondering. I mean, knowing Burkhart's story, I have a feeling it's not going to be a simple open and shut case.
You're right to be skeptical. It wasn't immediate, but the wheels of justice, they did start to turn.
Okay.
In 1926, a warrant was issued for Hale and Burkhart's arrest for the murders of Bill and Rita Smith.
Okay.
And Burkhart was captured quickly, but Hale, always the schemer, he initially disappeared.
Yeah.
However, he later turned himself in, dressed to the nines as if he had nothing to hide.
Oh, wow. That's a classic power move, isn't it? Trying to appear all innocent while leaving a trail of bodies in his wake. Did the evidence catch up with him eventually?
It did, but it took some pressure.
Yeah.
So while Hale maintained his innocence, federal agents, they focused their attention on Burkhart.
Yeah.
And here's a key turning point in the case. Burkhart, he cracked under the pressure and confessed,
Oh, wow.
revealing the entire plot and implicating his uncle.
Wow.
So you can almost feel the weight of his crimes finally catching up with him.
Yeah.
Right.
So what were the consequences? Did they actually pay for their crimes?
They did, at least for a time.
Okay.
Burkhart was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison
Wow.
at the Oklahoma State Penitentiary in 1926.
Okay.
Hale faced trial a bit later in 1929
Okay.
and was also found guilty of murder, eventually ending up in Leavenworth Penitentiary.
Yeah.
And these sentences, especially the life imprisonment for Burkhart, they really underscore the gravity of their crimes, you know, and the way that they systematically targeted and terrorized the Osage people.
Hearing about Burkhart's sentence, part of me feels relieved.
Uh-huh.
Like, at least there were consequences.
Right.
But then I think about the Osage community and the trauma that they endured. Can we really call that justice?
That's a difficult question,
Yeah.
and it's one that continues to be debated today.
Yeah.
And as we'll see, Burkhart's story, well, it doesn't end there.
Oh, no.
Remember, he was sentenced to life, but in 1937, he was paroled after serving only 11 years. You might think, okay, maybe he's learned his lesson. Maybe he's a changed man.
Yeah.
But that's not quite what happened.
Yeah. That's where things take, a truly unbelievable turn.
Okay.
So let's talk about Burkhart's parole and what happened next.
Okay. You've definitely piqued my curiosity. What happened after he got out?
Right.
Did he try to make amends for his past, or did he fall back into his old ways?
Well, not even 3 years after his release, Burkhart found himself in trouble again.
Oh, no.
This time he teamed up with this woman named Clara May Goad,
Okay.
and they robbed his former sister-in-law's house.
Stealing $7,000. That's over $150,000 in today's money.
Wow, it seems like old habits die hard.
Yeah.
So they got away with it.
Not quite. They were caught and found guilty of federal burglary charges.
Okay.
And Burkhart's parole was revoked.
Oh, God.
And he was sent back to prison for another 7 years. It seems like crime really was in his blood.
You have to wonder what was going through his mind, Did he just not care about the consequences, or did he think he could, outsmart the law again?
It's a question that adds another layer of complexity to his character, right?
Yeah.
Was he driven solely by greed, or were there other forces at play? But here's where it gets even more controversial.
Okay.
In 1966, he received a full pardon from the Oklahoma governor for his role in the Osage murders.
A pardon.
Yeah.
After everything he did? That's hard to believe. How is that even possible?
It's a decision that continues to spark debate and raise concerns about justice and accountability.
Yeah.
The decision came down to a 3-2 vote by the Oklahoma Pardon and Parole Board, and the reasons behind the pardon remain somewhat unclear.
Wow.
Which just adds another layer of complexity to this already convoluted case.
It's a reminder that sometimes justice isn't, black and white.
Right.
There are always shades of gray, and Burkhart's pardon definitely falls into that category.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And this pardon, I think, it forces us to ask ourselves some tough questions.
Yeah.
Like what does true justice look like?
Yeah.
Is forgiveness possible even for the most heinous crimes?
Those are big questions, and I don't think there are any easy answers. But let's shift gears for a moment and talk about Burkhart's life after the pardon.
Yeah.
Did he ever express, any remorse for his actions?
That's what makes his story so intriguing, right?
Okay.
So after prison, he moved back to Osage County to live with his brother Byron. And later he settled in Cleveland, Oklahoma, but not exactly in the lap of luxury. He lived in what some described as a mice-infested trailer.
It's almost poetic, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like this man who spent his life chasing riches ends up, in poverty. It makes you think about the true cost of greed.
It certainly does. Burkhart died in 1986 at the age of 94, leaving behind a legacy of greed, violence, and a lot of unanswered questions.
Yeah.
But what's even more striking, I think, is that he died on what would have been Molly Kyle's 100th birthday.
Wow.
A final twist of fate and a life full of them.
Yeah, it sounds like he never truly escaped the shadow of his past.
His will requested that his ashes be spread in the Osage Hills.
Okay.
But according to sources, his son decided to toss him over a bridge instead.
A rather unceremonious ending for a man who tried to control so much, but Burkhart's story, as horrific as it is, has recently captured the attention of a much wider audience.
Right. And that's because of, I guess, this pop culture phenomenon surrounding the Osage murders.
Okay.
So we have David Grann's best-selling book, Killers of the Flower Moon,
Yeah.
which dives deep into this story.
Yeah.
And now there's a film adaptation directed by Martin Scorsese with Leonardo DiCaprio portraying Ernest Burkhart.
It's fascinating how, how different mediums can shed new light on historical events.
Yeah.
I imagine the film offers a visual and emotional experience that even a well-written book can't fully capture.
Absolutely. And with a director like Scorsese at the helm, I mean, it's going to be a powerful and thought-provoking film.
Yeah.
I think what's resonating with people is that this story isn't just about a distant past.
Yeah.
It speaks to these ongoing issues of power, greed, and the exploitation of vulnerable communities.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
The Osage murders serve as a stark reminder that the pursuit of wealth and power can corrupt even the most, seemingly upstanding individuals. And it's a reminder that these kinds of injustices can happen anywhere at any time if we aren't vigilant.
Exactly. It's a call to action.
Yeah.
To speak out against wrongdoing, to hold those in power accountable, and to work towards a more just and equitable society.
So as we delve deeper into Ernest Burkhart's life and the Osage murders, what's the one key takeaway you think our listeners should walk away with?
For me, it's the importance of remembering and acknowledging the injustices inflicted upon the Osage people.
Yeah.
Their story is a testament to their resilience and strength in the face of, unimaginable adversity.
Yeah.
And I think it also highlights the power of storytelling. Grann's book and Scorsese's film have brought this story to a global audience, ensuring that the victims are not forgotten and that their voices are heard.
It's incredible to think how one book, Killers of the Flower Moon, has sparked such widespread interest in this case. What stood out to you when you read it?
It's a real page turner.
Yeah.
Grann, he masterfully weaves together historical research, investigative journalism, and personal narratives.
Yeah.
He brings the story to life in a way that you can't help but feel the weight of the tragedy and the injustice.
I've heard it's a must-read for anyone who wants to understand this case in more depth.
Yeah.
And now the movie, which, features such prominent actors,
Right.
is sure to reach an even larger audience.
That's the power of storytelling, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, these different mediums, they offer these unique perspectives.
Yeah.
And can really breathe new life into these historical events.
I'm curious, though, the film focuses on Ernest Burkhart.
Yeah.
And he's played by, a big-name actor.
Sure.
Do you worry that might overshadow the true heart of the story, the Osage Nation and the immense trauma that they endured?
That's a valid concern. I think it's crucial to remember that Burkhart, while a central figure, he was just one player in a much larger and more systemic issue.
Exactly. The Osage murders weren't just isolated incidents. They were part of a larger pattern of exploitation and violence against Native Americans.
Right.
It's important to remember the historical context here.
You're right. The Osage Nation, like many other tribes, they had already been forcibly removed from their ancestral lands.
Yeah.
And subjected to policies designed to erode their culture and sovereignty.
Yeah.
And then And then when they finally found a source of wealth and prosperity with the oil boom, they were targeted and victimized by those who sought to steal what was rightfully theirs.
It's a truly heartbreaking cycle of injustice. Their head rights, which were supposed to protect their interests, became a target on their backs. It makes you question who these systems are really designed to protect.
It's a tragic irony. These head rights meant to provide a degree of economic security turned into a death sentence for many.
Yeah.
And it's a stark reminder that the pursuit of wealth and power can often come at the expense of human life and dignity.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the life of Ernest Burkhart and the Osage murders, what's the one question you'd leave our listener with?
The Osage murders remind us that even though these horrific events happened decades ago, the fight for justice and recognition continues today.
Yeah.
What can each of us do to ensure that such tragedies are not repeated, and how can we work towards a more just and equitable future for all?
That's a powerful question and a call to action for us all. It's been an eye-opening deep dive, and I hope our listener feels empowered to learn more about this complex and important piece of history.
It's been a pleasure joining you on this journey.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep. It's incredible to think how one book, Killers of the Flower Moon, has sparked such widespread interest in this case. What stood out to you most when you read it?
Oh, it's a real page-turner.
Yeah.
Gran, he masterfully kind of weaves together the historical research, investigative journalism, and personal narratives.
Right.
He brings the story to life, in a way that you can't help but feel the weight of the tragedy and the injustice.
I've heard it's a must-read for anyone who wants to understand this case more in depth.
Yeah.
And now the movie, with, it has such prominent actors in it,
Yeah.
it's sure to reach an even larger audience.
Definitely. That's the power of storytelling, right?
Yeah.
These different mediums, they offer these unique perspectives.
Yeah.
And can really breathe new life into these historical events.
I'm a little curious, though. The film, it focuses on Ernest Burkhart, and he's played by, a big-name actor.
Right.
Do you worry that might overshadow the true heart of the story?
Yeah. The Osage Nation and the immense trauma they endured.
That's a valid concern. It's crucial to remember that Burkhart, while a central figure, was just one player in a much larger, more systemic issue.
Exactly. The Osage murders weren't just isolated incidents, right? They were part of a larger pattern of exploitation and violence against Native Americans. It's important to keep in mind, the historical context here.
You're right. The Osage Nation, like many other tribes, had already been forcibly removed from their ancestral lands and subjected to policies, that were designed to erode their culture and sovereignty.
Yeah.
And then when they finally found a source of wealth and prosperity with the oil boom, well, they were targeted and victimized by those who sought to steal what was rightfully theirs.
It's a heartbreaking cycle of injustice. Their head rights, which were supposed to protect their interests, just became a target on their backs. Makes you wonder who these systems are really meant to protect.
Yeah, it's tragic irony,
These head rights that were meant to provide, some economic security turned into a death sentence for so many. And it's a stark reminder that the pursuit of wealth and power, can often come at the expense of human life and dignity.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the life of Ernest Burkhart and the Osage murders, what's one question you want to leave our listeners with?
I guess the Osage murders remind us that even though these horrific events happened decades ago, the fight for justice and recognition continues.
Yeah.
What can each of us do to ensure that these kinds of tragedies are not repeated? And how can we work towards a more just and equitable future for everyone?
That's a powerful question and a call to action for us all. It's been a really eye-opening deep dive, and I hope our listeners feel empowered to learn more about this complex and important piece of history.
It's been a pleasure joining you today.
It has been great having you. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.